My name is Latasha Tasha for short, and I'm 32 years old. 5 years. That's how long I paid for my sister's college tuition every single semester, every textbook, every meal plan. I drained my savings to ensure Brianna had the start in life I never got. So imagine my surprise when on the night of her graduation she handed me a court summons. She wasn't thanking me. She was suing me for our grandfather's house, the very roof over my head. "Your only job is to sacrifice Tasha," she sneered, sipping the $500 champagne I paid for. "That's your place in this family." I looked at the legal papers, then at my parents who were nodding in agreement, and felt something inside me snap. Before I tell you how I turned their victory into a nightmare, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever been the family ATM and decided to close the account. The air in the restaurant was thick with the scent of fried chicken, collard greens, and expensive perfume. Magnolia's was the kind of upscale soul food spot in Atlanta where you went to see and be seen, where a plate of mac and cheese cost more than my weekly grocery budget back in college. I rushed through the heavy oak doors, breathless, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My shift at the hospital had run long, a triple bypass that went sideways, and I hadn't even had time to change. I was still wearing my blue scrubs, a stark contrast to the sea of silk sequins and tailored suits filling the dining room. My mother, Bernice, intercepted me before I could even make eye contact with the hostess. She looked immaculate in a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my first car, her hair laid to perfection, her jewelry glittering under the warm, ambient lighting. But her face was twisted into a scowl that could curdle milk. "Look at you!" she hissed, grabbing my arm with a grip that was surprisingly strong. "You look like you just scrubbed a floor. We have guests, Tasha. Important guests. Kyle's parents are here. Couldn't you have at least put on a dress? Or are you trying to embarrass us on purpose?" "I just saved a man's life, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though the exhaustion was pulling at my eyelids. "The surgery ran over. I came straight here so I wouldn't miss the toast." "Excuses," she snapped, smoothing a non-existent wrinkle on her skirt. "Always excuses with you. Just go sit at the end of the table and try not to draw attention to yourself. And for God's sake, take that stethoscope off your neck." She pushed me toward the long table in the center of the room where my family and Kyle's family were already seated. Brianna was at the head, glowing in a custom-made graduation gown that I knew I'd see the bill for later. She was laughing loudly at something Kyle said, her hand resting possessively on his arm. Kyle, her new husband of 3 months, looked smug in a suit that was a little too tight, his face flushed with expensive liquor. My father, Otis, was on Brianna's other side, beaming with a pride I had never seen directed at me. "There she is," Kyle shouted when he saw me, his voice booming across the restaurant. "The late arrival. Better late than never, right? Tasha, grab a seat, though. We might be out of the good appetizers." He laughed at his own joke, and my parents chuckled along, a nervous, performative sound meant to smooth over the awkwardness of my appearance. I found my seat at the far end of the table next to a distant cousin I hadn't seen in years. It was the kids' table equivalent, far from the center of action, far from the celebration. I sat down, feeling the eyes of the entire room on my scrubs, on my fatigue, on my otherness. A waiter appeared instantly, looking down his nose at me. "Can I get you something to drink, ma'am? Perhaps some water?" "I'll have a glass of the champagne everyone else is drinking," I said, my voice firm. He hesitated, glancing at my mother, who gave a barely perceptible nod. "Of course," he said, turning away. I looked down at my phone and saw a notification from my bank app. A charge for $3,200 at Magnolia's had just been processed. I took a deep breath. I was paying for this party. I was paying for the food, the drinks, the venue, the very chair my mother was sitting on while she judged me. And yet I wasn't even worth a proper greeting. "So, Brianna," I called out, my voice cutting through the chatter. "Did you get the transfer, the tuition for your final semester?" The table went quiet. Brianna looked up, her smile fading into a look of annoyance. "Oh, that," she said, waving a manicured hand dismissively. "Yeah, I got it. But seriously, Tasha, you cut it close. The bursar's office was threatening to hold my diploma. Next time, try to be a little more prompt. Okay, it was super stressful for me. Stressful for you? I repeated, feeling a spark of anger ignite in my chest. I picked up 3 extra shifts to make that happen, Brianna. 3 12-hour shifts on top of my regular schedule. A thank you would be nice. Kyle snorted into his drink. Come on, Tasha, don't be petty. It's her graduation day. Let's not make it about money, all right? It's tacky. Tacky. I looked at him. Really looked at him. This man who had never held a steady job, who claimed to be an entrepreneur, but whose ventures always seemed to need funding from my sister, which meant funding from me. It's easy to call money tacky when you're not the one earning it, Kyle. Watch your tone, my father Otis rumbled from the other end of the table. He hadn't spoken to me yet, hadn't asked how I was, hadn't offered a hug, but he was quick to defend the golden couple. This is a celebration. Don't bring your bitterness in here. We're all family. We help each other. That's what we do. Help each other? I asked, looking around the table. I've paid for 5 years of college. 5 years. Tuition, housing, books, spending money. That's over $200,000, Dad. And I haven't heard a single word of gratitude. Not one. You're the oldest, my mother interjected, her voice sharp. It's your responsibility. You have a good job. You don't have a husband or kids to worry about. What else are you going to do with your money? Hoard it. God blesses those who give, Tasha. You should remember that. I stared at her, at the woman who had birthed me, but who looked at me like a stranger. My good job was the result of years of grueling study of student loans. I was still paying off of nights spent crying from exhaustion because I had no support system. But to them, I was just a resource, a bank account with a pulse. The waiter returned with my champagne, placing it on the table, with a clink that sounded like a gunshot in the tense silence. I picked it up, swirling the golden liquid. Well, I said, forcing a smile that felt tight on my face. To Brianna, congratulations on your degree in, what was it again, fashion marketing. I'm sure it will be very useful. Brianna narrowed her eyes. It's a legitimate industry, Tasha. Just because you like wearing pajamas to work doesn't mean the rest of us don't appreciate style. Kyle stood up, then tapping his fork against his glass. All right, let's get back to the good vibes, he announced, flashing a winning smile at his parents, who were watching the exchange with polite confusion. I want to propose a toast, he raised his glass high, to my beautiful wife Brianna, the smartest, most talented woman I know, and to her amazing parents Bernice and Otis. Thank you for everything you've done to make this day possible. Your generosity, your support, your love. It's the foundation of Brianna's success. We couldn't have done it without you. To the Williams family. To the Williams family. The guests echoed, raising their glasses. My parents beamed, soaking up the praise, nodding graciously, as if they had personally written the checks, as if they had sacrificed anything other than their pride. I sat there, my glass untouched on the table. The injustice of it burned in my throat, hot and acrid. They were taking credit. They were actually taking credit for my sweat, my tears, my sleepless nights. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor, drawing every eye back to me. Actually, I said, my voice ringing out clearly in the sudden hush. I think there's a misunderstanding. Mom and Dad didn't pay for Brianna's degree. I did. Every cent. From the first semester to the last. So if we're thanking the financiers of this operation, I think my name should be on the list. The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the ice melting in the water glasses. My mother's face went from smug to furious in a heartbeat. My father slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. Sit down, girl, he roared, his voice shaking with rage. How dare you? How dare you try to humiliate us in front of guests? You ungrateful, selfish child. Who raised you? Who put a roof over your head? Your money. It's family money. It's all the same pot. Don't you dare stand there and count pennies like a miser. You're the big sister. It was your duty, And now you want a medal for doing what you're supposed to do. Shame on you. Shame on me? I laughed a harsh, brittle sound. Shame on me for telling the truth. You haven't spent a dime on anyone but yourselves in 10 years, Dad. You drive a Cadillac while I'm paying off Brianna's student loans. And you want to talk about duty. That's enough! Brianna shrieked, standing up so abruptly her chair tipped over. You always do this. You always have to make everything about you. Oh, poor Tasha. She works so hard, she's such a martyr. We get it. You're jealous. You're jealous because I'm happy, because I'm married, because I have a life, and you have nothing but your job. She reached under the table and pulled out a thick manila envelope. Her face was flushed, her eyes wild with a mixture of malice and triumph. You think you can hold that money over my head forever? You think you own me because you paid a few bills? Well, guess what? I'm done with your charity. And I'm done with you acting like you're the queen of the castle just because Grandpa Earl liked you better. She threw the envelope across the table. It slid across the white tablecloth, knocking over a vase of flowers, water spilling everywhere, soaking the linen. It stopped right in front of me. Read it, she spat. Go ahead. Read it and weep, big sister. I looked down at the envelope. It was heavy, thick with documents. I opened the flap, my fingers numb, and pulled out the top sheet. It was a legal document. A summons. Civil action, it read at the top. Plaintiff Brianna Williams, defendant Latasha Williams. Subject dispute over title and ownership of real property located at 452 Malcolm X Boulevard. My grandfather's brownstone, my home. I looked up at Brianna, confusion warring with shock. What is this? It's an eviction notice, basically, Brianna said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. Or a notice that you're about to be evicted. I'm suing you for the house, Tasha. Grandpa Earl was senile when he died. Everyone knows it. He didn't know what he was doing when he let you move in there. That house is a family asset. It's inheritance, and by law inheritance is split among siblings. But since you've been living there rent-free for 5 years, eating up the value I figure you owe me. Plus, I'm married now. I'm starting a family. Kyle and I need a place to live, a real home, not that cramped apartment. You're single. You're always at the hospital anyway. You can rent a condo. You can afford it with all that big money you're always bragging about. You're suing me. For my own house. I whispered the words, feeling foreign in my mouth. Our house, she corrected, smirking. Grandpa's house, and soon to be my house. Kyle's already got an architect looking at it. We're going to open up the floor plan, maybe put in a deck. It's going to be beautiful. You should be happy for us. It's staying in the family. I looked at my parents. They weren't shocked. They weren't angry. They were looking at me with a stony defiance. They knew. They had known this was coming. Maybe they had even encouraged it. It's only fair, Tasha, my mother said, her voice cool and practical, as if discussing the weather. Brianna needs a start. You've had your turn. You've had the house to yourself for long enough. It's time to share. Don't be greedy. Greedy. I paid for the party. I paid for the degree. I paid for the dress she was wearing. And now they wanted the roof over my head. I looked at the summons again, then at Brianna's triumphant face, at Kyle's greedy grin, at my parents' cold indifference. Something cold and hard settled in my stomach. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was clarity. Okay, I said quietly. Okay. Brianna blinked, her smile faltering for a second. What do you mean, okay? I mean, I received it, I said, holding up the papers. I'll see you in court. I turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving the champagne, the dinner, and my family behind. I walked out into the cool Atlanta night, the legal papers clutched in my hand, and for the first time in 5 years, I didn't feel tired. I felt ready. If they wanted a war, they were going to get one, and they had no idea who they were fighting. The sun had barely risen over Atlanta when the nightmare continued. I hadn't slept, not really. I had spent the night staring at the ceiling of my bedroom, the master suite, on the top floor of the brownstone, listening to the old house settle. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like an accusation. The court summons Brianna had thrown at me lay on my nightstand next to a glass of water, a physical manifestation of my family's greed. I thought I would have at least a few days to prepare to call Mr. Henderson to breathe. I was wrong. At 7:00 a.m. sharp, a sound shattered the morning silence. It wasn't a knock. It was the high-pitched whine of a power drill grinding into metal. It was coming from my front door. I threw on my robe, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, and raced down the 2 flights of stairs. The beautiful mahogany staircase, which I had paid $6,000 to have refinished last year, felt miles long. I flew to the foyer and yanked the heavy oak door open. The sight that greeted me made my blood run cold and then instantly boil. My entire family was standing on my porch like an invading army. Otis, my father, was pointing at the lock mechanism. Bernice, my mother, was holding a tray of coffees from Starbucks as if she were hosting a garden party. Brianna was scrolling on her phone looking bored while Kyle, her husband, was leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed, looking at my house like he was measuring it for curtains. And right there, kneeling at the doorknob, was a man in blue coveralls with Mike's locksmith embroidered on the pocket, actively drilling into my deadbolt. "What do you think you are doing?" I screamed, my voice raw from the lack of sleep. "Stop! Get away from my door!" The locksmith jumped the drill, skidding across the brass plate, leaving a deep scratch. He looked up at me wide-eyed, then back at my father. "Sir, you said you lost the keys. You said you were the owner." "I am the patriarch of this family," Otis boomed, puffing out his chest. "This is my father's house. I have every right to secure it." "Get off my porch," I hissed at the locksmith, stepping between him and the door. "I am the resident. I have the keys. I have the deed. If you drill 1 more inch into my property, I will have you arrested for breaking and entering. Do you want to lose your license today, Mike?" The man looked at my face, saw the absolute fury in my eyes, and started packing his tools immediately. "I'm out. I don't do domestic disputes. You folks figure this out." He didn't even ask for a service fee. He just scrambled down the steps and practically ran to his van. "Tasha, you are being unreasonable," Bernice sighed, taking a sip of her latte. "We were just trying to help. We were worried about security. Since you live here all alone in this big place, we thought it would be safer if we all had access. For emergencies." "Security." I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "You brought a locksmith to lock me out of my own home the morning after you sued me. You aren't worried about my safety, Bernice. You're trying to stage a takeover." "It is not a takeover, it is a reclamation," Brianna said, finally looking up from her phone. She walked past me, pushing her way into the foyer. "It's Grandpa's house. It belongs to the family. And since I'm the one starting a family, I need the space. Kyle and I have been looking at floor plans. We're going to take the second and third floors. You can keep the garden apartment in the basement. It's cozy. It suits you." "Get out," I said, pointing to the street. "Get out of my house." "You need to calm down," Kyle said, stepping into my personal space. He towered over me, using his height to intimidate that casual arrogance of a man who has never been told no in his life. "We are just moving things along. The lawsuit is just a formality, Tasha. Everyone knows the judge is going to split this asset. We are just getting a head start on the move-in process. Why make it hard? Make it hard." I stared at him, then looked at my parents, who were now stepping into the hallway, looking around with critical eyes. My father ran a finger over the wainscoting I had installed. "You changed the paint color," Otis grumbled. "Earl liked the cream wallpaper. This gray is too modern. We'll have to change it back." "You don't get to change anything," I shouted, backing them toward the door. "You don't get to decide the paint. You don't get to change the locks. You don't get to live here. Do you have amnesia? Do you all have collective amnesia?" "What are you talking about?" Bernice asked, feigning innocence. 5 years ago," I said, my voice trembling with the weight of the memory. 5 years ago, right here in this hallway. Do you remember the sheriff was standing right where Kyle is standing? He had an eviction notice. He had a foreclosure order. Grandpa Earl was upstairs, bedridden, dying of congestive heart failure, terrified that they were going to throw him out on the street. "That was a misunderstanding," Otis muttered, looking away. "A banking error." "It wasn't an error," I yelled. "It was gambling debt, you dad. You drained Grandpa's accounts. You took the money meant for his property taxes and you blew it at the casino in Biloxi. You and Mom spent his medication money on a leased Mercedes because you wanted to look rich at the church revival. Lower your voice, Bernice hissed, looking frantically at the neighbors' windows. People will hear you. Have some dignity. Where was your dignity when I had to beg the bank manager for an extension? I stepped closer to her. I was 27 years old. I was working double shifts as an RN on the trauma floor cleaning up blood and death for 12 hours a day, and then going to night classes to become an anesthetist. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. I was drowning. I turned to Brianna, who was inspecting the chandelier with a look of distaste. And where were you? You were in your freshman year partying in Miami for spring break on my dime. I called you Brianna. I called you crying, telling you we were going to lose the house, that Grandpa was going to die in a state facility if we didn't fix this. And do you remember what you said? Brianna rolled her eyes. Oh my God, are you still holding on to that I was 18, Tasha? I was a child. You can't blame me for wanting to have a college experience. You told me to figure it out, I reminded her. You said, that sounds like a you problem, Tasha. Don't stress me out during finals. Only it wasn't finals week, it was spring break. I turned back to my father. I paid the arrears, $80,000. I emptied my 401k. I took out a personal loan with an interest rate that should have been illegal. I saved this house. I saved Grandpa's dignity. And the deal was simple. I pay the debts, I keep the house, and I pay for Brianna's tuition so you wouldn't steal from her college fund like you stole from Grandpa. We didn't steal, Otis said, his face flushing a deep, angry purple. We borrowed. We were going to put it back. You always have to make yourself the hero, don't you, Saint Latasha? The martyr. You think just because you threw some money at a problem you own us. I don't think I own you, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I know I own this house. I earned it. I scrubbed Grandpa's bed sores in this house when you were too busy at the country club to visit him. I held his hand when he took his last breath in that bedroom upstairs while you were at a car dealership looking at the new models. I earned every single brick in this building. That's in the past, Kyle interrupted, waving his hand as if swatting away a fly. Whatever arrangement you had with your grandfather is irrelevant. He didn't leave a will giving you the house exclusively. We checked the probate records. He died intestate. That means the property goes to the next of kin. That's Otis. And Otis is giving the house to us. So technically you're the squatter here. The arrogance radiated off him like heat. He had no idea what was in that yellow envelope I had given to the judge in my imagination 1,000 times. He had no idea about the deed of sale. He thought he was the smartest person in the room because he was a white man in a suit talking down to a black woman in her bathrobe. You checked the probate records? I asked, a bitter smile touching my lips. You did your homework. We did, Brianna said, stepping up beside her husband. We're not stupid, Tasha. We know our rights. You've been living here rent-free for 5 years. That's your inheritance. You got free rent. Now it's my turn. I want the master suite. The light is better for my content creation. You can move your stuff down to the basement this weekend. We'll even help you carry the heavy boxes. See, we're reasonable. Reasonable. I felt the room spinning. You sue me, you try to break into my house, and now you're evicting me to the basement. It's a nice basement, Bernice added helpfully. It has a separate entrance. You'll have your privacy. And really, Tasha, do you need 4 bedrooms? It's just you. Brianna and Kyle are planning a nursery. They need the room. Don't be selfish. Think about your future nieces and nephews. I am thinking about them, I said. I'm thinking I don't want them raised by people who think theft is a family value. Otis stepped forward, his hand raised as if to strike me, a reflex from my childhood that made me flinch instinctively. He stopped himself, but the threat was there. You watch your mouth, girl. I am still your father. I brought you into this world. And you've been trying to bill me for it ever since, I retorted, standing my ground. We are done talking, Kyle said, stepping between me and my father, chest puffed out. He placed a hand on my shoulder, not gentle, not affectionate, but heavy and controlling. He pushed me just slightly, just enough to make me stumble back a step. "You need to know your place, Tasha," Kyle said, his voice dropping to a low, condescending register. "You're hysterical. You're emotional. You're not thinking straight. We are doing you a favor by letting you stay in the basement. We could kick you out on the street, so you should be thanking us. You should be thanking Brianna. Now be a good sister and get out of the way. We have measurements to take." He pushed me again, harder this time. "We're moving in next week. Have the master suite cleared out by Friday, or we'll clear it out for you. And trust me, you won't like how we pack." I looked at his hand on my shoulder. I looked at Brianna smirking behind him. I looked at my parents, silent and complicit in their greed. "Get your hand off me," I said, my voice shaking, not with fear, but with a cold, terrifying rage. "Or what?" Kyle sneered. "You going to call the cops on your own family?" "Yes," I said. "I am." I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed 911. Kyle tried to grab it, but I dodged him, backing out onto the porch where the neighbors could see. "I am at 452 Malcolm X Boulevard," I said into the receiver, loud enough for the entire street to hear. "I have intruders in my home who are refusing to leave. One of them just assaulted me. I need immediate assistance." The color drained from Kyle's face. My mother gasped. Brianna looked furious. "You bitch," Brianna hissed. "You're actually calling the police." "I told you," I said, holding the phone to my ear as I stared them down. "Get off my porch." They scrambled. For all their bluster, for all their entitlement, they were cowards. Otis cursed at me as he dragged Bernice down the steps. Brianna screamed that I was dead to her. Kyle gave me one last look of pure venom, pointing a finger at me. "You'll regret this," he spat. "You'll regret this when the judge hands us the keys next week. You just declared war, Tasha." "No," I whispered as they piled into their cars and sped away before the sirens arrived. "I didn't declare war. I just stopped surrendering." I stood on the porch of the house I had saved, the house I had paid for with my youth and my sanity, and watched them leave. My hands were trembling, but my resolve was harder than granite. They thought they could bully me. They thought I was just the nurse, the wallet, the doormat. They thought they knew everything about this house and my grandfather's legacy. But they didn't know about the yellow envelope in my safe. They didn't know that the war was already over. They just hadn't seen the mushroom cloud yet. I went back inside, locked the door, and waited for the police, ready to file the report that would be the first nail in their coffin. The silence that followed the police escorting my family off the property did not last long. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, the kind that exists in the eye of a hurricane before the winds change direction and come back twice as hard. I sat on the bottom step of the staircase, my head in my hands, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the thumping of my own heart. I thought I had bought myself a day, maybe two, to regroup and speak to Mr. Henderson. I underestimated Bernice Williams. My mother does not fight with her fists. She fights with her phone. She fights with whispers in the church vestibule. She fights by weaponizing her tears and turning the community into a firing squad. It started 10 minutes after they drove away. My phone, which I had placed on the entry table, lit up. Then it vibrated. Then it lit up again. Within seconds it was buzzing continuously, a frantic, angry dance across the polished wood surface. I picked it up and saw the name on the screen. Aunt Sheila. My father's older sister, the self-appointed matriarch of the family and the head usher at Greater Ebenezer Baptist Church. I knew better than to answer, but some foolish part of me thought that maybe, just maybe, she was calling to ask for my side of the story. I slid the bar to accept. Latasha. The voice on the other end didn't even say hello. It was a low, disappointed rumble that I had heard directed at sinners and backsliders my entire life. "I cannot believe what I am hearing. I just got off the phone with your mother. She is hysterical. She can barely breathe. Aunt Sheila." I started, my voice weary. "They tried to break into my house. They brought a locksmith." "Do not lie to me, girl," she cut me off. "Bernice told me everything. She said they came over to bring you breakfast to try and make peace after the misunderstanding at the restaurant. She said they wanted to celebrate the newlyweds. And you called the police. On your own father. On your baby sister. They were drilling the lock, Auntie. They were worried about you. Sheila shouted, the phone crackling. Your mother said you looked manic yesterday. She said you were talking crazy about lawsuits and deeds. They thought you were having a breakdown. They were trying to get in to save you, and you treated them like criminals. Have you lost your mind? Tasha, have you lost your soul? I felt the blood drain from my face. Of course. That was the narrative. I wasn't the victim standing my ground. I was the unstable, ungrateful daughter having a mental health crisis. It was brilliant. It explained away my anger, invalidated my legal claims, and positioned them as the concerned saviors. They want to take the house, Auntie. Brianna wants to evict me. It is a family home, Sheila snapped. It belongs to all of you. But that is not even the point. The point is that you put your sister out on the street. Bernice told me Brianna and that nice boy Kyle have nowhere to go. They gave up their apartment because you promised them they could move in. You promised them Tasha, and now you are going back on your word because you are jealous. I never promised anyone anything, I said, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. They made that up. They are lying to you. Bernice does not lie, Sheila declared with the conviction of a fanatic. She is a woman of God. She has sacrificed everything for you children. And this is how you repay her, by shaming her, by making her cry in front of her son-in-law. I expected better from you. Earl expected better from you. He is rolling over in his grave right now, seeing you act so selfish. You have a good job. You have money. Why are you being so stingy with your own flesh and blood? I hung up. I couldn't listen to another second of it. But hanging up on Aunt Sheila was like trying to stop a tidal wave with a paper shield. She was just the first wave. Next came the group chat notifications. The Williams family reunion chat, a group with over 50 members, suddenly exploded. Cousin Marcus, yo, Tasha. Is it true you called the cops on Uncle Otis? That's messed up, fam. Great Aunt Hattie, praying for your spirit, niece. Greed is a sin. The Lord don't like ugly. Cousin Keisha. I heard she tried to fight Brianna. At her own graduation party, jealousy is a disease, get well soon. The messages were coming in so fast I couldn't read them all. My mother wasn't just calling family. She was activating the entire network. She was painting a masterpiece of victimhood. In her version of events, I was the bitter, lonely spinster sister who couldn't stand seeing Brianna happy and successful. I was the rich, heartless nurse hoarding my grandfather's wealth while my parents struggled. She left out the gambling. She left out the tuition payments. She left out the fact that I was the only reason Grandpa Earl didn't die in a state-run facility. Then the phone rang again. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was local. I answered thinking it might be the security company I planned to hire. Sister Williams. It was Pastor Jenkins. My stomach dropped to the floor. Hello, Pastor, I whispered. Latasha. I am sitting here with your mother and father. He said, his voice dripping with that smooth, practiced pastoral concern that usually meant you were in trouble. They are in my office. Your mother is inconsolable. She tells me you have turned your heart against your family. She tells me you are threatening to leave your sister homeless. Pastor, I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. They are lying. They tried to take my home. I have the deed. I paid for it. We are not talking about earthly possessions, Latasha, he interrupted, dismissing my legal rights as if they were petty grievances. We are talking about spiritual duty. The Bible says if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his own house, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Your parents are worried about you. They say you have become hard. They say you care more about money than mercy. I paid $200,000 for Brianna's school. I said, my voice rising. I paid off my father's gambling debts. How much more mercy do they need? We do not keep score in love, Latasha, he chided. Your sister is just starting out. She needs a helping hand. Why is your heart so closed? I want you to come down to the church. Right now, we are going to sit down. We are going to pray, and we are going to sign whatever papers are necessary to restore peace to this family. Your mother says if you sign the house over to the family trust, she will forgive you for the police incident. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was a dark, hysterical sound that bubbled up from my chest. Sign the house over to the family trust. There was no trust. There was just Otis's pocket and Bernice's purse. Pastor, I said, cutting him off. With all due respect, ask my father to show you his bank statements from 5 years ago. Ask him where the tithe money went. Ask him why Grandpa Earl had bed sores before I took over his care. There was a silence on the line. A long, heavy pause. I will pray for your confusion, Pastor Jenkins said coldly. But know this. You are sowing wind, and you shall reap the whirlwind. Do not expect the church to stand by you when you treat your elders with such contempt. The line went dead. They were excommunicating me. Not officially, but socially. My mother had managed to turn the two pillars of my world, my extended family and my church, against me in less than 2 hours. She had weaponized my community. She knew that for a Black woman in the South, being ostracized by the church was a social death sentence. She was banking on the fact that I would break, that the shame would be too much, that I would hand over the keys just to stop the whispers. I put the phone on Do Not Disturb, but the notification still flashed on the screen, a relentless strobe light of hate. Ungrateful, bitch, thief. You think you're better than us? Remember where you came from. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hands shaking so badly, I spilled half of it on the counter. I felt small. I felt besieged. I looked out the window at the backyard, the garden I had planted for Grandpa Earl, so he would have something beautiful to look at in his final days. They wanted to take this. They wanted to pave it over and put in a pool for Kyle to float in while drinking beer bought with my money. Then a new notification popped up. It wasn't a text, it was an Instagram tag, then another, then a Facebook notification. I opened Instagram. Brianna had posted a video. She was sitting in a car, tears streaming down her face, looking perfect in her distress. The lighting was carefully chosen to make her look fragile. I don't usually do this, she said to the camera, wiping a tear with a perfectly manicured hand. But I don't know where else to turn. My own sister, my big sister, she's trying to ruin my life. Kyle and I just got married. We're trying to start our lives. And Tasha, she lured us into a false sense of security. She promised us we could live in our grandfather's house. She knows we spent our savings on the wedding because she told us the house was sorted. And now she's kicking us out. She called the cops on us today. On my parents. Just because we tried to come over and talk. I'm scared, guys. I don't know where we're going to sleep tonight. It's just so crazy how money changes people. Please, if anyone knows a good lawyer who helps victims of financial abuse, hit me up. And the caption read, #family trauma, #betrayal, #homeless, #narcissist sister. It had 4,000 views in 20 minutes. The comments were vitriolic. People I didn't even know were calling for my head. They were tagging my employer. They were tagging the nursing board. @nurse. Tasha, is this who you are, scammer? I wouldn't want her touching me in the hospital if she treats her family like this. Someone find out where she works. This is abuse. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was a direct attack on my livelihood. Brianna knew exactly what she was doing. She knew that as a CRNA, my license and my reputation were everything. If she painted me as unstable, abusive, or a thief, I could be suspended pending an investigation. I could lose my clearance. I could lose the ability to pay for the lawyer I desperately needed. I watched the view count tick up. 500, 5,000. She was going viral. She was leveraging her influencer wannabe status and the sympathy of strangers to crush me. Then a text message came through. It bypassed the Do Not Disturb setting because I had Brianna listed as an emergency contact, a holdover from the days when I paid her phone bill and worried about her walking home late from class. It was a screenshot. A screenshot of an email draft addressed to the Ethics Board of the State Nursing Association. The subject line read, "Formal complaint regarding Latasha Williams, CRNA." The text below it was short, brutal, and devoid of the tearful persona she was playing online. "You see the power of the narrative now, sis. I control the story. Nobody cares about your receipts. They care about the crying bride and the mean old spinster. Sign the quitclaim deed by tomorrow morning. Transfer the title to me and Dad. Or I hit send. I'll tell them you're stealing meds. I'll tell them you're unstable. I have Mom and Dad as witnesses. You'll lose your license. You'll lose your job. And you'll still lose the house because you won't have the money to fight us. Don't be stupid, Tasha. You're smart, but you're not this smart. Checkmate." I stared at the screen until the pixels blurred. The audacity, the sheer unadulterated evil of it. She wasn't just greedy, she was willing to burn my entire existence to the ground to get what she wanted. She was blackmailing me with my career, the career I had built to save them. I put the phone down on the counter. The shaking in my hands stopped. The fear that had been gripping my throat evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. It was the same feeling I got in the operating room when a patient flatlined. The panic vanishes, the training kicks in, and you do what needs to be done. She thought she had checkmated me. She thought she controlled the narrative because she was loud, but she had made a fatal error. She had put her threat in writing. She had sent the blackmail text from her own phone number to mine. She was so arrogant, so convinced of her own invincibility as the golden child that she didn't realize she had just handed me the smoking gun. I didn't reply. I didn't call. I didn't scream. I took a screenshot of her text. I took a screenshot of the Instagram video. I took screenshots of the comments tagging my workplace. I compiled them all into a folder on my cloud drive named The War. Then I picked up my car keys. I wasn't going to the church. I wasn't going to my parents' house. I was going to the one place where lies didn't matter, where tears didn't count, and where paper trails were king. I was going to Mr. Henderson's office, and I wasn't going there to settle. I was going there to load the cannon. Brianna wanted to talk about the power of the narrative fine. I was about to introduce her to the power of a countersuit. The leather chair in Mr. Henderson's office smelled of old tobacco and justice. It was a smell I had associated with safety since I was a little girl, back when Grandpa Earl used to bring me here to sit quietly and color while they discussed business. The office hadn't changed in 30 years. The same heavy mahogany desk, the same wall of leather-bound law books that looked like they held the secrets of the universe, and the same view of the Atlanta skyline, though the buildings had grown taller and shinier around us. I sat across from him, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to stop them from shaking. I had shown him everything. The text messages from Brianna threatening my nursing license, the Instagram video where she played the victim, the comments from strangers calling for my head. I felt naked, exposed, and terrified. My career was the one thing that was mine, the one thing I had built without their interference, and now Brianna was holding a match to it. Mr. Henderson took off his wire-rimmed glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He looked tired. He was 72 years old, a man who had marched in the civil rights movement, a man who had seen the worst of what the world could do to Black families. But looking at the evidence of what my own sister was doing to me, he looked defeated. "Latasha," he said, his voice gravelly and low, "you know your grandfather was my best friend. We grew up on the same block. We bought our first suits together. I promised him on his deathbed that I would look out for his legacy. And by legacy, he didn't just mean the house. He meant you." I nodded, fighting back tears. "I know, Mr. Henderson, but I don't know what to do. She's going to report me to the board. Even if it's a lie, an investigation could suspend me for months. I have a mortgage. I have bills. If I lose my income, I lose the house anyway. They win." He put his glasses back on and leaned forward, his eyes suddenly sharp behind the lenses. "They don't win, Tasha, because they aren't fighting from a position of strength. They are fighting from a position of absolute catastrophic desperation. You think this is just about greed? You think this is just Brianna wanting a pretty house for Instagram? I blinked. Isn't it? She's always been entitled. She thinks she deserves the world just for existing. It is entitlement. Yes, he agreed. But it is also panic. Terror. Brianna isn't suing you because she wants the house. She is suing you because she needs the house. She needs the equity. And she needs it yesterday. He opened a file folder on his desk. It wasn't my file. It was a new one, thin but deadly. I did some digging, he said. You know I still have friends in low places and high places. When you told me about this Kyle fellow, something didn't sit right. A young white man, claiming to be a tech entrepreneur, marrying into the family so quickly, pushing so hard for asset liquidation. It fit a profile. So I ran a financial background check. Not the kind you get on the internet for $20. The real kind. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a credit report, but it was covered in red ink. Kyle isn't an entrepreneur, Mr. Henderson said, his voice dripping with disdain. He is a gambler. But not the casino kind like your father. That would be too honest. Kyle is a cryptocurrency speculator. He plays with leverage. He borrows money he doesn't have to bet on digital coins that don't exist. And 6 months ago, the market crashed. I looked at the numbers on the page. They were staggering. Negative balances, margin calls, loans from companies with names that sounded like shell corporations for loan sharks. He owes $450,000, Tasha, Mr. Henderson said. And these aren't student loans. These are high-interest short-term loans. The kind of people he borrowed from don't send letters. They send breakers. He is drowning. He is completely, utterly insolvent. My mouth fell open. 400,000. Brianna just married him. Does she know? She knows, he nodded. She found out 2 weeks after the wedding. That explains why she suddenly needed family assets immediately. Kyle convinced her that if they could just get the house, they could take out a second mortgage, pay off the sharks, and invest the rest to make it all back. It's the classic addict's logic. Just one more big score to fix everything. They are using you as their bailout. They view your grandfather's hard work as their get-out-of-jail-free card. I felt a wave of nausea. It wasn't just jealousy. It was survival. They were trying to cannibalize me to save themselves from their own stupidity. Brianna wasn't just a brat. She was a desperate woman married to a con artist, and she was willing to destroy her sister to keep her husband from getting his legs broken. But that wasn't the worst part. Mr. Henderson watched me process this, his expression grim. There is more, Tasha. And this part is going to hurt. What could be worse than my sister trying to steal my home to pay off her husband's gambling debts? Your parents, he said softly. I froze. What about them? Otis and Bernice have been pushing this lawsuit just as hard as Brianna. Harder even. Your father was the one who found the lawyer for them. Your mother is the one rallying the church against you. I asked myself why. Why would they destroy their responsible, successful daughter for the one who has never worked a day in her life? I waited my breath, caught in my throat. Because Kyle made them a promise, Mr. Henderson said. He reached into the folder again and pulled out a printout of an email chain. It was between Kyle and my father. Read the highlighted section. I picked up the paper. The email was dated 3 weeks ago. Otis, don't worry about the legal fees. Once we flip the title on the brownstone, we can tap the equity for about $600K. I take care of my business debt, and the first check I write is to the dealership. That F-150 Platinum you wanted, consider it done. And Bernice gets the renovation budget for the Florida condo. We just need to break Tasha. She's weak. She'll fold if we apply enough pressure. I read it twice, then a third time. The words swam before my eyes. Break Tasha. She's weak. F-150 Platinum. My father wasn't defending his baby girl because of paternal instinct. He wasn't siding with Brianna because he believed in fairness. He was selling me out for a truck, and my mother, the renovations for the Florida condo. That was a timeshare they had bought years ago and let fall into ruin because they couldn't afford the maintenance fees. They were trading my career, my home, my sanctuary for a new kitchen and a timeshare and a pickup truck. I put the paper down. I felt cold. Ice cold. The kind of cold that starts in your marrow and works its way out. The tears that had been threatening to fall earlier evaporated. There was no sadness left in me. There was only a vast, empty clarity. All my life I had made excuses for them. I told myself they were victims of circumstance. I told myself they loved me in their own broken way. I told myself the favoritism was just a habit, not a choice. But this was a transaction. I was a commodity to them. I was a resource to be harvested. When I stopped giving freely, they decided to take by force. They looked at me and didn't see a daughter or a sister. They saw a piggy bank to be smashed open. Mr. Henderson watched me closely. I'm sorry, Tasha. I debated showing you that. I know how much you wanted to believe in them. No, I said, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. Thank you. I needed to see it. I needed to know the price of my parents' love. Apparently, the market value is roughly $70,000 and a granite countertop. I stood up and walked to the window looking out at the city. I thought about the nights I spent studying anatomy while my friends went to parties. I thought about the double shifts. I thought about the check I wrote every semester for Brianna, thinking I was investing in her future when I was really just funding her entitlement. They thought I was weak. That's what Kyle wrote. She's weak. She'll fold. They mistook my kindness for weakness. They mistook my loyalty for stupidity. They thought because I had spent my life cleaning up their messes, I would lay down and let them walk over me one last time. I turned back to Mr. Henderson. He was waiting, his pen hovering over his legal pad. Do you want to settle? He asked. We could offer them a small sum to go away. It might save your reputation faster. No, I said. Are you sure a court battle will be ugly? They will lie. They will drag your name through the mud. Brianna might actually send that complaint to the nursing board. Let her, I said. I have a clean record. I have references. I will survive an investigation. But I will not survive giving in to them one more time. If I pay them off now, they will come back next year. And the year after that. They are parasites, Mr. Henderson, and you don't negotiate with parasites, you remove them. I walked back to the desk and placed my hand on the file containing the deed of sale and the promissory notes. The yellow envelope. My grandfather's shield. Kyle is drowning, I said. Good. Let him drown. My parents want a new truck. They can walk. Brianna wants my house. She can live in the reality she created. Mr. Henderson smiled a slow, predatory smile that reminded me why he was the most feared divorce attorney in Atlanta before he semi-retired. So what are your instructions, Miss Williams? I looked at the email chain one last time. Break Tasha. Prepare the filings, I said. File the countersuit for the tuition money. File the motion to dismiss their claim on the house based on the deed. And send a cease and desist to Brianna regarding the nursing board with a copy of these emails attached, so she knows that if she pushes that button, I will sue her for defamation and malicious prosecution, and I will attach her husband's credit report to the public filing. I paused, thinking about the truck. And Mr. Henderson, yes. When we go to court, I said, make sure my father is on the witness stand when we discuss the email about the F-150. I want to see his face. I want to see him try to explain to a judge and to the congregation he cares so much about that he tried to make his daughter homeless because he wanted heated seats. Mr. Henderson uncapped his fountain pen. It will be my pleasure. I picked up my purse. I felt lighter than I had in years. The grief was gone. The guilt was gone. All that was left was the cold, hard steel of resolve. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the hammer. And they were about to find out exactly how hard I could hit. "Prepare the files, Uncle Henderson," I said, walking to the door. "We have a family reunion to attend, in court. Silence is a weapon. Most people think it is a shield, a way to hide when the world gets too loud or too cruel. But when you use it right, silence is a trap. It is the deep breath before the sniper takes the shot." After leaving Mr. Henderson's office, I went home and did exactly what we discussed. I engaged the nuclear option of communication. I cut the cord. I didn't defend myself against the lies Brianna was spewing on Instagram. I didn't answer the 57 calls from my mother, or the angry rambling voicemails from my father, demanding to know why I had abandoned the family. I didn't try to explain myself to the cousins who were sliding into my DMs calling me a thief. I simply pressed block. Block on my phone, block on Facebook, block on WhatsApp. I even blocked their email addresses. For 3 days, I became a ghost in my own life. The effect on them was immediate and exactly what Mr. Henderson had predicted. For my family, my silence was confirmation. In their twisted, entitled logic, if I wasn't fighting back, it meant I was guilty. It meant I was scared. It meant I was cowering in the dark, packing my bags, defeated by the sheer force of their social pressure. I could practically hear the conversation at their dinner table. Kyle pouring that cheap wine he pretended was vintage, telling Otis that he had scared me straight with his legal talk. Brianna laughing that high, tinkling sound that used to make me smile, but now made my skin crawl, telling Bernice that I was probably too ashamed to show my face. They were so loud in their victory that they didn't notice I was quietly reinforcing the walls. I went to work. I did my rounds at the hospital. I intubated patients, monitored vitals, and pushed meds with the steady hands of a woman who knows exactly who she is. My colleagues asked if I was okay noticing the shadows under my eyes, and I just smiled and told them I was focusing on my career. I was the picture of professional calm. But every break I got, every moment I was alone in the elevator, or the break room I was watching. I had created a dummy Instagram account weeks ago, just a blank profile to follow design trends, but now it served a different purpose. I watched Brianna. She was posting like a woman who had just won the lottery. She was manic with triumph. Her stories were a reel of premature celebration. She was at a high-end furniture store sitting on a velvet sectional that cost more than my car. The caption read, "New vibes for the new house, manifesting abundance." And she posted mood boards for what she called the Brownstone Project, detailing how she was going to tear out the original oak wainscoting I had painstakingly restored because it was too dark and old-fashioned. She captioned a photo of paint swatches with "Out with the old, in with the new." Finally taking back what belongs to us. Justice tastes sweet. The comments were a cesspool of validation. People I barely knew, people from our church, were cheering her on. "You deserve this, queen," they wrote. "So brave of you to stand up to your toxic sister. God don't like ugly, she got what was coming to her." I read every single one. I didn't get angry. I didn't cry. I screenshotted them. Every insult, every lie, every threat. I filed them away in the cloud folder. It was ammunition. They were handing me the bullets and thanking me for the privilege. But their arrogance didn't stop at social media flexing. They were so convinced that I was broken, so sure that the court hearing was just a formality to sign over the deed, that they got careless. They got greedy. It was Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting in my car in the hospital parking garage eating a sandwich I couldn't taste when my phone pinged. It wasn't a text, it was a Zillow alert. I had set up alerts for my address years ago, mostly to keep an eye on property taxes and neighborhood values. I never expected to see an active listing for 452 Malcolm X Boulevard. My heart gave a single hard thump against my ribs, a physical reaction to the violation. I opened the app, my fingers cold. There it was. My home. My sanctuary. 452 Malcolm X Boulevard, Unit B. Garden apartment for rent. Available immediately. They weren't just planning to move in. They were planning to monetize my home before they even owned it. They were trying to rent out the bottom floor to pay off Kyle's crypto debts. I clicked on the listing and my breath hitched. The photos. They were my photos. They were pictures I had taken 2 years ago when I renovated the basement unit for a traveling nurse friend who stayed for a few months. I had shared those photos in our private family group chat, proud of the work I had done, showing them how I was improving Grandpa's legacy. Now they were using my own pride against me. I read the description, and it made my blood run cold with its audacity. Stunning newly renovated garden suite in a historic family brownstone. Luxury finishes, private entrance, access to shared garden. Perfect for a young professional. Managed by private owners who care about community. $3,200 a month. $3,200. They were trying to rent out my basement for $3,000 a month. That would cover the mortgage on the entire property with money left over for Kyle's truck payments. And then I saw the contact information at the bottom of the page. Listed by BK Management. BK, Brianna and Kyle. They had already formed an LLC. They had registered a business entity to manage a property they did not own. They were so sure, so absolutely convinced that I was a doormat who would roll over and die that they had started a business, using my assets as their capital. And the availability date. Move-in ready next Monday. Next Monday, the day after the court hearing. They were promising occupancy of a house they didn't hold the title to on a date when I would still be sleeping in my bed upstairs. They were taking deposits. I clicked on the application link, and sure enough, there was a request for a $50 application fee and a holding deposit of 1 month's rent. This wasn't just arrogance anymore. This wasn't just a family dispute. This was fraud. Real estate fraud, wire fraud. They were soliciting money for a rental property they had no legal right to lease. I sat there in my car, the engine idling, and I felt a strange sensation wash over me. It wasn't rage. Rage is hot. Rage makes you shake. This was cold. This was the absolute zero of emotion. It was the feeling of watching a surgeon cut into a chest cavity, precise, necessary, and completely detached. They had crossed the line from being terrible family members to being criminals. And they had done it publicly on a national real estate platform, leaving a digital footprint that no amount of crying to the pastor could erase. I didn't scream. I didn't call Brianna to scream at her. A week ago I might have. A week ago I would have begged them to stop. But the Tasha who begged was gone. She had been evicted by their cruelty. I took a screenshot of the listing. I took a screenshot of the BK Management contact info. I took a screenshot of the application page asking for money. I took a screenshot of the date stamp showing it was active right now. Then I opened my email and attached the files. I sent them to Mr. Henderson with a simple subject line, Zillow listing. The body of the email was just one sentence. They are trying to rent the basement. Add this to the pile. I put my phone down on the passenger seat and looked at myself in the rearview mirror. My eyes were dry. My face was calm. I looked like a woman who had just finished a long shift and was ready to go home. I started the car and drove out of the garage. As I merged onto the highway, a song came on the radio, something upbeat and poppy, but I didn't hear it. All I could hear was the sound of the trap snapping shut. They thought my silence was fear. They thought I was hiding. They had no idea that I was just standing very, very still, waiting for them to walk into the crosshairs. Brianna wanted to talk about who owned the house, fine. We would talk about it. But we wouldn't be talking about it at the dinner table. We would be talking about it in front of a judge with a Zillow listing as Exhibit A. I smiled. It didn't reach my eyes. It was a cold, sharp thing, a blade disguised as an expression. Let them list it. Let them take the deposits. Let them spend the money they didn't have. Every dollar they took from a stranger was another year on their sentence. They wanted the house. They were going to lose everything they had, trying to take it. I drove home to my brownstone. The house I bought, the house I saved, and I slept like a baby. The sterile air of the hospital had always been my sanctuary. While the rest of the world was messy, chaotic, and filled with the unpredictable variables of human emotion, the operating room was a temple of order. In here, beep meant heart rate flatline, meant action, and silence meant focus. I was good at this. I was excellent at this. When I put on my scrubs and my mask, I wasn't the black sheep of the Williams family. I wasn't the sister being sued for her own home. I was Latasha Williams, CRNA, the woman who kept you alive while the surgeons cut you open. It was Wednesday, 2 days after I had sent the Zillow listing to Mr. Henderson. I was in the middle of a break, sitting in the staff lounge with a lukewarm cup of coffee staring at the wall. My phone was in my locker, still on silent, still blocking the avalanche of hate my family was generating. I felt safe here. I felt untouchable. Then the overhead page crackled to life. Security to the main lobby. Security to the main lobby. Code gray. Code gray meant a combative person. Usually it was a confused patient or a family member who had received bad news and lashed out in grief. It happened. We were trained for it. I took a sip of my coffee, feeling a vague sympathy for whoever was down there dealing with the noise. Then the door to the lounge opened, and Sarah, the head charge nurse, stuck her head in. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with that specific look of workplace panic that meant something personal had just breached the professional firewall. "Tasha," she said, her voice tight, "you need to come with me." "Why, is it a patient?" "No," she said, lowering her voice, as if she were afraid the walls were listening. "It is security." They called up. "There is a man in the lobby. He is screaming your name. He says he is your father." The coffee turned to acid in my stomach. I stood up, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. Otis. My father was here. He hadn't just crossed a line, he had erased it. He had brought the circus to my job, the one place I had fought so hard to keep separate from their dysfunction. "I am not going down there," I said, my voice shaking. "I cannot see him." "Sarah, if I go down there, he wins. He wants a scene." "I know," Sarah said gently. She knew bits and pieces of what was happening, just enough to know my family was difficult. Security knows too. "Chief Miller said you don't need to go to the lobby. He wants you in the security control room. He wants you to see this Tasha. He says you need to authorize the trespass order." I followed her. We took the service elevator, bypassing the public areas. I felt like a fugitive in my own workplace. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic bird-like rhythm that I usually only felt when an airway collapsed. This was worse. This was personal. The security control room was a bank of monitors and low-humming electronics tucked away in the basement. Chief Miller, a large, stoic man who had been a Marine before he ran hospital security, was standing with his arms crossed, watching the main screen. He turned when I entered. "Miss Williams," he said, his voice rumbly and calm. "I am sorry about this, but we have a situation." He pointed to the large monitor in the center. The feed was high-definition, crisp and brutal. There he was. Otis Williams. My father. He was standing in the middle of the atrium, right in front of the reception desk. He was wearing his Sunday suit, the one he wore to church to collect tithes, but it looked disheveled. His tie was crooked. He was sweating, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief, and he was red in the face. He looked small on the screen, but his movements were large, erratic. He was pointing a finger at the terrified young woman behind the reception desk. "Turn the audio up," Chief Miller said to the technician. The sound filled the small room. It was tinny, processed through the microphone, but the voice was unmistakable. It was the voice of my childhood nightmares. "I demand to see the director," Otis was bellowing. "I am not leaving until I speak to the man in charge. You have an employee here who is a thief. She is immoral. She is abusing the elderly." "Sir, please lower your voice," the receptionist stammered. "I cannot call the director. If you have a complaint about a staff member, there is a form." "I don't want a form." Otis slammed his hand on the desk. "I want justice. Her name is Latasha Williams. She works in anesthesia. She thinks she is high and mighty, walking around here like she saves lives, but she is killing her own family. She stole a house. She stole from her own sister. I want her fired. Do you hear me? I want her fired for moral turpitude." I watched my hand covering my mouth. He was trying to get me fired. He wasn't just venting, he was actively trying to destroy my career. If I lost my job, I couldn't pay the mortgage. If I couldn't pay the mortgage, the house would be foreclosed. And if the house was foreclosed, maybe he thought he could swoop in and buy it cheap, or maybe he just wanted to see me burn. Sir, you are disturbing the patients. A security guard stepped into the frame. He was young, trying to be polite. You need to leave the premises. Don't you touch me? Otis shouted, backing away. I have rights. I am a father. I raised that girl, I put clothes on her back. And this is how she repays me, by hiding. By blocking my calls. Tasha, I know you are in here. Come out here and face me. He spun around, addressing the people in the waiting room. Patients, visitors, children. They were staring at him with a mixture of fear and disgust. You all think she is a good nurse. Otis yelled at a woman holding a baby. She isn't. She is a snake. She let her grandfather die so she could take his money. She is watching her sister sleep on the street. What kind of monster does that? Chief Miller looked at me. Do you want to go out there, Tasha? Or do you want us to handle it? Handle it, I whispered. Please, just get him out. Chief Miller nodded and spoke into his radio. Remove him, use restraints if necessary, but get him out the double doors. On the screen, 2 more guards appeared. They weren't the polite ones. These were the big guys, the ones who handled the psych ward breakouts. They flanked Otis. Sir, this is your last warning, the lead guard said. Leave now or you will be arrested for trespassing and disorderly conduct. Otis looked at them. For a second, I thought he was going to swing. I saw his hands ball into fists. I saw the desperation in his eyes. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that his shouting wasn't working. He wasn't in his living room. He wasn't at the dinner table where he ruled by volume. He was in the real world, and in the real world, he was just a crazy old man causing a scene. But he couldn't let it go. His ego wouldn't let him walk away quietly. He had to have the last word. He had to prove he was right. He leaned into the chest of the lead guard, getting right in his face, and he noticed the body camera strapped to the guard's vest. He looked right into the lens, his eyes wild. You want to arrest me? Go ahead, arrest the victim. You are protecting a woman who makes $200,000 a year. The room went silent. I gasped. He kept screaming right into the camera. She makes 200 grand. I saw her tax returns. I saw the mail. She is rich. She sits on all that money, driving her fancy car, living in that big brownstone all by herself, and she won't even buy her parents a car. A simple car. We need transportation. Her sister needs a roof. And she hoards it all. It is greed. It is sin. Chief Miller looked at me, one eyebrow raised. 200,000. I didn't answer. I just stared at the screen. Otis had just admitted it. He had admitted the motive. It wasn't about Grandpa. It wasn't about family unity. It wasn't about moral turpitude. It was about the money. He knew exactly how much I made. He had been snooping. He had seen my mail. And he was enraged because he felt entitled to a cut. She won't even buy her parents a car. He had said the quiet part out loud. He was willing to get arrested, willing to scream in a hospital lobby because he was mad I hadn't bought him the truck Kyle promised him. The guards grabbed him. Otis tried to pull away, but they were stronger. They each took an arm and marched him toward the automatic doors. I made you, Otis screamed as they dragged him backward, his heels sliding on the linoleum. You are nothing without me. You owe me, Tasha. You owe me. The doors slid shut, cutting off his voice. The silence in the control room was absolute. Chief Miller let out a long breath. Okay. That happened. He turned to the technician. Save that footage. Save the lobby cam and pull the body cam footage from Officer Davis. I want the audio crystal clear. He turned to me. Tasha, I am going to file a criminal trespass warning. If he steps foot on this property again, he goes to jail. No questions asked. But I need you to know something. What? I asked, my voice sounding hollow. He admitted to stalking your mail, Miller said. He knew your income. That implies he has been opening your financial documents. That is a federal crime. And the rest of it, that was extortion. He was trying to shame you into paying him. I nodded. I know. I stood up. I felt shaky, but strangely vindicated. For years they had gaslit me. They had told me I was imagining their greed. They had told me I was selfish for keeping what I earned. But now it was recorded. It was in 1080p high definition. The mask had slipped, and the monster was underneath, screaming about a car. "Can I have a copy?" I asked. Of the video. Chief Miller pulled a USB drive from the computer. He handed it to me. It felt heavy in my hand, like a weapon. "Take it to your lawyer," he said. "And Tasha, take the rest of the day off. Go home. Lock your doors." I walked out of the hospital into the bright afternoon sun. I sat in my car and held the USB drive. It was small, silver, and cold. My father had come to destroy me. He had come to strip me of my dignity and my job. Instead, he had given me the final piece of the puzzle. He had given me the proof of malice. He thought he was shouting at a receptionist. He didn't realize he was testifying against himself. I plugged my phone into the car charger. There was a text from Mr. Henderson. "Status update." I typed back, my fingers flying. My father just visited the hospital. He gave a performance. And he confessed to the motive on camera. I have the video. I started the engine. The F-150 Platinum. That was what this was all about. My father was willing to burn his daughter at the stake for heated seats in a moonroof. I wasn't sad anymore. I was disgusted. And disgust is a very powerful fuel. I drove to Mr. Henderson's office to drop off the drive. The file was getting thick. The case was getting airtight. And my family was digging a hole so deep they would never see the sun again. Let them scream. Let them post. Let them sue. I had the truth on a silver stick, and I couldn't wait to play it for the judge. 2 days after my father's spectacular meltdown in the hospital lobby, Mr. Henderson received a call. It was from a man named Lionel Sterling, the attorney representing my family. He was requesting an emergency mediation session. He claimed that his clients, despite the deep emotional wounds I had inflicted upon them, were willing to come to the table. They wanted to settle. They wanted to find a path to healing. I knew exactly what that meant. It meant they were terrified. It meant the video footage of my father screaming about my salary was burning a hole in their strategy, and they needed to get me to sign over the deed before I pressed charges for harassment or extortion. They wanted to get me in a room, gang up on me, and bully me into submission one last time. Mr. Henderson advised against it at first. He said we had enough to crush them in court without ever speaking to them again. But I told him no. I wanted to go. I needed one more piece of evidence. I needed them to confirm on the record exactly what their intentions were. I needed to set a trap so deep they wouldn't realize they were in it until the dirt was hitting the lid of the coffin. So we agreed. We met at Sterling's office on a rainy Thursday morning. The office was in a strip mall next to a dry cleaner, a far cry from the mahogany-paneled dignity of Mr. Henderson's firm. The carpet was thin, the fluorescent lights buzzed with an irritating hum, and the air smelled faintly of chemical solvents. My family was already there when we arrived. They were sitting on one side of a long, cheap laminate conference table, arranged like a tableau of the grieving and the wronged. My mother Bernice was dabbing her eyes with a tissue, though I noticed her makeup was perfectly intact. Otis sat stoically staring at the table, looking like a man carrying the weight of the world, rather than a man who had just screamed at a receptionist about a truck. Brianna and Kyle were holding hands, projecting an image of unified youthful innocence. Mr. Sterling, a man with a shiny suit and a smile that showed too many teeth, stood up to shake our hands. He offered us water in tiny plastic cups. The power dynamic they were trying to set was obvious. We were on their turf now. I sat down next to Mr. Henderson. I kept my face blank. I kept my hands folded on the table. My phone was face down in front of me, recording. Sterling started the meeting with a speech that was equal parts condescension and manipulation. He talked about the sanctity of family. He talked about how tragic it was when misunderstandings led to legal battles. He looked at me with sad puppy dog eyes and said that my parents were heartbroken, simply heartbroken that their eldest daughter had felt the need to involve the police in a private family matter. Then he turned the floor over to Brianna. This was the performance. I could see her taking a deep breath, centering herself, summoning the tears. She looked at me, her eyes shimmering with unshed moisture. Tasha. She began, her voice wobbling perfectly. I know we have said things, hurtful things, and I am sorry for that. The stress of the wedding, the new house, everything, it just got to me. But sitting here looking at you, I just miss my big sister. She paused to let that sink in. My mother let out a soft sob in the background. You were always my protector, Tasha, Brianna continued. When we were kids, you were the one who put band-aids on my knees. You were the one who helped me with my homework. I looked up to you. And I think I just got scared. Kyle and I are starting this new life and we are drowning. We didn't mean to try and take the house from you, we thought since you were doing so well, and Grandpa loved us all, that maybe it was what he would have wanted, for us to be together under one roof. She reached across the table, her hand hovering near mine, though she didn't touch me. We don't want to fight you, Tasha. We just want a home. And Mom and Dad, they are getting older. They need stability. If we had the house, Kyle and I could take care of them. We could all be a family again. We could fix up the brownstone, make it a place for generations of Williamses. Isn't that better than all this anger? Isn't that better than lawyers and police reports? It was a masterclass in gaslighting. She was rewriting history in real time, erasing the eviction threats, the blackmail, the Zillow listing. She was painting a picture of a communal utopia where she was the loving daughter and I was the prodigal sister finally coming home. Bernice chimed in, then her voice trembling. We just want peace, Tasha. Your father and I, we aren't young. This stress is killing us. We forgive you for the scene at the hospital. We know you were stressed. We just want to put this behind us. If you sign the deed over to the family trust, we can manage the property together. Brianna and Kyle will do the heavy lifting of the maintenance. You can keep your apartment in the basement. You won't have to worry about a thing. We will take care of everything. I looked at Kyle. He was nodding solemnly, the picture of a responsible son-in-law. We just want to step up, Tasha. Kyle said, his voice deep and serious. I know we got off on the wrong foot, but I promise you I will treat that house with the respect it deserves, and we will take care of Otis and Bernice. You have been carrying the burden alone for too long. Let us take it from here. I felt a wave of nausea. It was so slick. If I didn't know about the $400,000 in crypto debt, if I didn't know about the F-150 Platinum, if I didn't know they were already trying to rent out the basement to strangers, I might have believed them. They were offering me an out. They were offering me a way to stop being the villain. All I had to do was give them everything I owned. I looked at Mr. Henderson. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. It was time to spring the trap. I took a deep breath, letting my shoulders slump. I let my face soften, letting a look of hesitation and exhaustion creep into my eyes. I needed them to think I was breaking. I needed them to think the guilt trip was working. I don't know, I whispered, looking down at my hands. It has just been so hard. I feel like everyone hates me. Oh, honey, no one hates you, Bernice said quickly, leaning forward, sensing blood in the water. We love you. We are just worried about you. I looked up at Brianna. My eyes were wet, courtesy of thinking about how much I missed my grandfather. Brianna, I said, my voice shaking, if I do this, if I sign the house over, it is a huge sacrifice. That house is my retirement. It is my safety net. I know, Brianna said soothingly. I know, Tasha. And Mom and Dad. I continued, looking at my parents. You know, I have always tried to take care of you. I paid off the debts. I paid for the care. I am tired. I am just so tired of being the only one responsible. We know, Otis grunted, trying to sound sympathetic, but mostly sounding impatient. That is why we are doing this. To help you. So I need a promise, I said, locking eyes with my sister. If I give you the deed, if I let you and Kyle take ownership, do you promise right here and now that you will take full financial responsibility for mom and dad? Do you promise that you will use the equity in the house to secure their retirement? That you won't use it for anything else? That you will make sure they never have to worry about money again? The room went silent. This was it. This was the moment. I was asking them to commit to a lie so big it would choke them. I knew Kyle needed the equity to pay the loan sharks. I knew Otis wanted the truck. I knew Brianna wanted designer furniture. There was no way they could afford to support my parents, but they were greedy, and greed makes people stupid. Brianna didn't even blink. Yes, she said, her voice ringing with false sincerity. I promise, Tasha. That is the whole plan. Kyle and I are going to build an in-law suite on the second floor. We are going to use the money to set up an annuity for them. We will take care of everything. You won't have to pay another dime. Mom and Dad will be our priority. I looked at Kyle. Do you agree to this, Kyle? You will take care of them. You won't use the money for business debts or personal purchases. It all goes to the family. Kyle smiled that charming snake oil smile. Absolutely, Tasha. You have my word. We are doing this for Otis and Bernice. That is the only reason. We are going to take care of them for the rest of their lives. And then it happened. The moment I had been waiting for. The moment that would seal their fate. As Kyle finished speaking, he looked over at my father. Otis was watching him with a hungry, desperate intensity. And Kyle winked. It was quick. It was subtle. If I had been crying into my hands, I would have missed it. If I had been looking at my mother, I would have missed it. But I was watching Kyle. He winked at my father. A quick drop of the eyelid, a slight smirk. A signal. I got her. We said what she wanted to hear. The truck is yours. My father's shoulders relaxed. He let out a breath he had been holding. He smiled back, a small conspiratorial twitch of his lips. They thought they had won. They thought they had just scammed me out of $1 million property with a few teary promises and a wink. They had just verbally entered into a contract they had absolutely no intention of honoring, and they had done it while creating a record of their fraudulent intent. Mr. Sterling clapped his hands together. Well, that is wonderful. That is truly wonderful. I have the papers right here. We can sign the quitclaim deed now, and we will file the transfer tomorrow. We can put all this ugliness behind us. He slid a stack of documents across the table. The deed transfer, a settlement agreement that absolved them of all past debts to me, a confidentiality clause preventing me from talking about the dispute. I looked at the papers. I looked at the pen Sterling was holding out to me. I looked at Brianna, who was practically vibrating with excitement. I looked at my mother, who was already mentally decorating her new condo. I looked at Kyle, who was probably spending the money in his head right now. I reached out and took the pen. The room seemed to hold its breath. Brianna leaned forward. Otis licked his lips. I held the pen over the signature line. Then I stopped. I looked up at them, my face changing. The mask of the defeated, tired sister dropped away. The fear vanished. The hesitation evaporated. I looked at them with the cold, clinical detachment of a nurse calling a time of death. I need to think about it, I said. The air left the room in a rush. What? Brianna snapped, her mask slipping instantly. What is there to think about? You just said. I said I needed a promise, I replied, my voice steady and hard. And you gave me one. But this is a big decision. It is a legal decision. I need to review these documents with Mr. Henderson properly. I need to sleep on it. Tasha, don't do this, Bernice pleaded, the panic rising in her voice. We are so close. Just sign it. Why wait? Because I want to be sure, I said, standing up. I picked up my phone and visibly stopped the recording app. I saw Kyle's eyes dart to the screen, and I saw the color drain from his face as he realized what I had just done. I need 24 hours, I said. If you really want to take care of mom and dad, if you really want to be a family, 24 hours won't matter. But the deal, Kyle started, his voice losing its smooth charm. The lawyers are here now. Mr. Henderson stood up beside me, packing his briefcase with a snap. My client has the right to review the settlement, Mr. Sterling, he said, his voice booming in the small office. We will be in touch tomorrow. I looked at Brianna. She looked furious. She looked like a child who had been told Christmas was cancelled. Don't worry, Brianna, I said. I heard everything you said. I heard every single promise. And I am going to make sure everyone else hears them too. I turned and walked out. Tasha. Come back here, Otis shouted. We ignored him. We walked out of the office into the parking lot and got into Mr. Henderson's car. As soon as the doors closed, Mr. Henderson let out a low whistle. Did you see the wink? He asked. I saw it, I said. And I got the audio. They admitted that the transfer was conditional on them supporting my parents. And we have the credit report that proves they can't possibly do that. They just committed fraud on tape. They promised consideration for a contract they knew they couldn't fulfill. It's inducement, Mr. Henderson agreed. It proves bad faith. And combined with the Zillow listing, Tasha, they are done. They just handed us the case on a silver platter. I looked back at the strip mall office. I could see them through the window arguing. Kyle was waving his arms. Bernice was crying again. Brianna was on her phone, probably checking to see if I had posted anything yet. They thought they had won. They thought I walked away because I was scared. They had no idea that I walked away because I was done playing with my food. Tomorrow, I said. We file tomorrow. Tomorrow, Mr. Henderson said, starting the car. We file everything. And we ask for an expedited hearing. I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes. I didn't feel relief, not yet. I felt the cold, hard weight of the hammer in my hand raised and ready to strike. They wanted a family reunion. They wanted to share everything. Well, tomorrow I was going to give them exactly what they asked for. I was going to share the truth. And it was going to bury them. The morning of the hearing was gray and heavy, the kind of humidity that sticks to your skin and makes the air feel like a wet wool blanket. It was fitting weather for a funeral, which is exactly what today was. I wasn't burying a body, but I was burying the last shred of hope that I had a family. I walked into the Fulton County Superior Court with Mr. Henderson beside me. He moved slower than usual, his briefcase heavy in his hand, but his eyes were alert, scanning the hallway like a lion watching a herd of gazelles. I wore a charcoal suit, sharp and tailored armor for the modern woman. I didn't look like a nurse today. I didn't look like a sister. I looked like a CEO walking into a board meeting to fire everyone. My family was already there. They had taken over a bench outside the courtroom, a sprawling mass of nervous energy and false bravado. Otis was wearing a suit that was too shiny, the kind of polyester blend that catches the fluorescent lights and screams cheap. Bernice was in her Sunday best, a hat perched on her head, like a crown of thorns, clutching a Bible she probably hadn't opened since Easter. Brianna and Kyle were huddled together, whispering, looking for all the world like the young innocent victims of a cruel tyrant. When they saw me, the whispering stopped. Otis glared. Bernice looked away, dabbing at dry eyes with a handkerchief. Brianna just smirked, a quick, fleeting expression that vanished as soon as she realized Mr. Henderson was watching her. Their lawyer, Lionel Sterling, was pacing in front of them. If Otis's suit was cheap, Sterling's was expensive but loud. It was a pinstripe blue that was just a shade too bright, paired with a tie that looked like an optical illusion. He walked with a strut, checking his gold watch, radiating the confidence of a man who charges $500 an hour to destroy families. He was a shark, but the kind that swims in shallow water, feeding on scraps. We entered the courtroom. The wood paneling was dark, the air conditioning humming a low, constant drone. It smelled of floor wax and anxiety. We took our seats at the defendant's table. My family filed in behind Sterling, filling the plaintiff's side. They sat close together, presenting a united front, a wall of flesh and blood designed to intimidate. The bailiff called, "All rise." Judge Marilyn Vance entered. She was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that had seen every lie a human being could tell. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She just sat down, adjusted her robes, and looked at us over the rim of her glasses. "This is the matter of the estate of Earl Williams," she said, her voice dry as dust. "Plaintiff Brianna Williams Davis versus defendant Latasha Williams. Counsel, you may proceed." Sterling stood up. He buttoned his jacket with a flourish and walked to the center of the room. He didn't look at the judge, he looked at me. He pointed a finger, creating a theatrical line of accusation. "Your Honor," he began, his voice booming, practicing the oratorical style of a preacher who had lost his faith but kept the rhythm. "We are here today to right a terrible wrong. We are here to speak for a man who can no longer speak for himself. Earl Williams was a good man, a family man, a man who built a legacy with his bare hands so that his children and grandchildren would be safe." He paused for effect, walking toward the jury box, even though there was no jury. This was a bench trial. He was performing for an audience of one. But in his final years, Earl Williams was not himself. His mind was clouding. The dementia was taking hold, stealing his memories, stealing his judgment. And it was in this vulnerable state that the defendant, his eldest granddaughter, swooped in. He spun around and pointed at me again. "She didn't come to care for him out of love, Your Honor. She came as a wolf in sheep's clothing. She used her medical training not to heal but to control. She isolated him. She kept his own son, his own daughter-in-law, his beloved granddaughter Brianna away from him. She whispered poison in his ear. She told him his family didn't love him. She told him they had abandoned him. And slowly, methodically, she manipulated a confused, dying old man into signing over his life's work." I sat perfectly still. I didn't flinch. I didn't shake my head. I let the lies wash over me like dirty water. "She is a predator, Your Honor." Sterling continued, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "She is a woman who makes $200,000 a year. Yet she coveted the modest home of her grandfather. She wanted it all, and she used undue influence to get it. We are asking the court to overturn any deathbed transfers. We are asking the court to restore the natural order of inheritance. We are asking for justice for a family that has been robbed of their birthright." He sat down, looking pleased with himself. Otis patted him on the back. "Mr. Henderson didn't stand up. He didn't object. He just wrote something on his legal pad." "Call your first witness," Judge Vance said, sounding bored. Sterling called Brianna. She walked to the stand, her head bowed, playing the role of the grieving granddaughter to perfection. She sat down, took the oath, and looked at Sterling with wide, watery eyes. "Brianna, tell the court about your relationship with your grandfather," Sterling said gently. "We were so close," she said, her voice trembling. "I was his little princess. That's what he called me. Before Tasha took over his care, I used to go over there every day. We would sit on the porch. He would tell me stories. He promised me, Your Honor. He promised me that the house would always be a place for the whole family. He said he wanted me to raise my children there." "And what happened when Tasha moved in?" "Everything changed," she sniffed, wiping a tear. "She changed the locks. She wouldn't answer the door when we knocked. I would call and she would say he was sleeping or he didn't want to see anyone. She cut us off. It was like she kidnapped him. I didn't get to say goodbye. I didn't get to hold his hand at the end. She stole that from me. I watched her. I remembered the reality. I remembered begging her to come sit with him so I could go to the pharmacy. I remembered her saying, 'It smells like old people in there, Tasha. I can't deal with the sick vibe. It's depressing.' I remembered her blocking my number when I tried to call her from the hospice nurses station." Sterling led her through the script. She painted a picture of a confused, senile old man who didn't know what day it was, a man who would sign anything just to get a glass of water. "Did you ever hear your sister talk about the house?" Sterling asked. "Yes," Brianna said, looking directly at me with a flash of pure malice. "She used to say, 'I'm earning this.' She treated his care like a job, like a transaction. She said she deserved the house because she was the one changing his diapers. She didn't do it for love. She did it for the payout. Thank you, Sterling said. Your witness. Mr. Henderson stood up slowly. He didn't walk to the podium. He stood by his chair. Miss Williams, he said, his voice raspy. You say you visited every day before your sister moved in. Yes, she said. Can you tell me the name of your grandfather's dog? Brianna blinked. The dog, yes. The dog that lived in the house for 12 years. The dog that slept on the porch where you sat every day. What was his name? Brianna looked at her mother. Bernice looked away. It was Buster, she guessed. It was Roscoe, Mr. Henderson said. He died 3 years before your grandfather. If you visited every day, you would have known he wasn't there. No further questions. Brianna flushed red as she stepped down, but Sterling didn't seem worried. He knew the heavy artillery was coming next. Call Otis Williams. My father took the stand. He walked with a heavy tread, the weight of a man burdened by the sins of his child. He sat down and sighed into the microphone. Mr. William Sterling said solemnly, You are the decedent's only son. Is that correct? Yes, Otis said, his voice thick. Tell us about your father's mental state in the last 5 years of his life. He was gone, Otis said, shaking his head. His mind was like Swiss cheese. He didn't know who I was half the time. He would call me by his brother's name. He would forget where he put his wallet. He was easily confused. Anyone could have talked him into anything. He was a child, essentially. And did you try to intervene? Did you try to protect him? I tried, Otis said, looking at me with a gaze that was meant to be sorrowful, but looked more like hatred. I tried to get power of attorney. I tried to get him medical help. But Latasha, she blocked me at every turn. She told the doctors I was abusive. She poisoned him against me. She told him I only wanted his money, which was ironic considering she was the one draining his accounts, Otis added, improvising. I found unpaid bills. I found notices. She was taking his pension checks and using them for herself while he lived in squalor. That's why the house needed repairs. She let it rot while she bought fancy scrubs and went to nursing school. I gripped the edge of the table. The lie was so enormous, so inverted, it took my breath away. He was accusing me of the very things he had done. He was the one who drained the accounts. He was the one who left the property taxes unpaid until the sheriff showed up. So in your opinion, Sterling asked, was your father competent to sign a will or a deed in the last 5 years of his life? Absolutely not, Otis declared. He didn't know Tuesday from Thursday. If he signed anything giving that house to Tasha, it was because she tricked him. She took advantage of a sick old man. It is the greatest shame of my life that my own daughter could be so cruel. He wiped his eyes. The performance was Oscar-worthy. If I didn't know him, if I didn't know about the gambling, the F-150, the emails, I might have believed him. He looked like a broken patriarch. Thank you, Mr. Williams, Sterling said softly. Mr. Henderson didn't cross-examine him. He just looked at Otis for a long, uncomfortable minute until Otis shifted in his seat and looked away. No questions, Mr. Henderson said. Bernice was next. She corroborated everything. She cried about how much she missed the family dinners we used to have, ignoring the fact that I was never invited to them. She talked about how Brianna was the light of Earl's life, how he always said he wanted Brianna to have the house because she was the one who would fill it with babies. It was a coordinated assault. They were building a reality out of smoke and mirrors, brick by brick. They were painting me as a monster, a greedy, manipulative nurse who preyed on the weak. Sterling called character witnesses. People from the church who testified that Otis was a pillar of the community. People who said they had heard Bernice crying about being kept away from her father-in-law. By the time the plaintiff rested, the air in the courtroom felt toxic. The judge looked at me with an expression that was hard to read, but it wasn't friendly. The narrative had been set. I was the villain. Sterling stood up one last time. Your Honor, the testimony is clear. Earl Williams was incapacitated. Latasha Williams was in a position of trust and she abused it. The law is clear on undue influence. Whatever document she is hiding, whatever will she coerced him into signing it, is invalid. The estate belongs to the natural heirs. It belongs to the son, and by extension, the granddaughter who needs it. We ask for a summary judgment voiding any transfers and placing the property into a constructive trust for the family. He sat down. Kyle high-fived him under the table. Brianna looked at me and mouthed, "Bye-bye." Judge Vance turned her gaze to our table. She looked at Mr. Henderson, who was sitting with his hands folded over his stomach, looking like he was about to take a nap. "Mr. Henderson," she said, "does the defense have a case? Or should I issue a ruling based on the testimony I have heard?" Mr. Henderson stood up. He didn't pick up a briefcase. He didn't pick up a stack of files. He just picked up the yellow envelope. He walked to the bench. He moved slowly, deliberately. The room was silent. "Your Honor," he said, his voice quiet, but carrying to every corner of the room. "We have heard a lot of stories today. We have heard about memory loss. We have heard about family love. We have heard about intentions and promises." He paused and looked back at my family. Otis was leaning forward, a hungry look in his eyes. He thought this was the surrender. He thought Mr. Henderson was offering a settlement. But stories are wind, Your Honor. Mr. Henderson continued. "In a court of law, we deal in paper. My client has been accused of manipulating a will. She has been accused of influencing a bequest." He handed the envelope to the bailiff, who handed it to the judge. "But there is no bequest, Your Honor, because there is no estate to fight over regarding this property." The judge opened the envelope. She pulled out the document on top. It was blue-backed, heavy, and official. She adjusted her glasses. She read the first page. Then she flipped to the second. She stopped. A strange sound came from the bench. It was a snort. A choked, stifled sound. Judge Vance put her hand over her mouth. She looked at the document again. Then she looked at Sterling. Then she looked at Otis. And then she laughed. It wasn't a polite judicial chuckle. It was a laugh of genuine, incredulous amusement. She tried to cover it with a cough, but her shoulders were shaking. Sterling stood up, looking offended. "Your Honor is something funny." Judge Vance took a deep breath, composing herself, though her eyes were still dancing. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice trembling with suppressed mirth, "you have spent 3 hours arguing about the validity of a will. You have paraded witnesses up here to testify about the mental state of Mr. Earl Williams at the time of his death. You have argued about the laws of inheritance." She held up the document. "But you seem to have missed a very crucial piece of public record. This house that you are fighting over. It wasn't Earl Williams' house when he died." The color drained from Otis's face. Brianna stopped smiling. "What?" Sterling stammered. "Of course it was. He lived there. He lived there as a tenant," Judge Vance said. She looked at me, and for the first time there was respect in her eyes. "This is a deed of sale dated 5 years ago. Properly recorded, properly notarized, and fully paid." She looked at my family. "Earl Williams didn't leave this house to Latasha. He sold it to her. 5 years ago. For fair market value. She didn't inherit it. She bought it." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb that had just detonated, sucking all the oxygen out of the room. "And this," Mr. Henderson said, pulling another stack of papers from his pocket, "are the bank records showing where that money went. It went to pay off liens. It went to pay off gambling debts incurred by Mr. Otis Williams. And the rest? The rest went into a trust to pay for his medical care so he wouldn't rot in the state facility his son tried to put him in." Mr. Henderson turned to my father. "You didn't know he sold it, did you, Otis? You thought you could just wait him out? You thought you could steal it back once he was in the ground. But Tasha saved him. She bought him out so he could die with dignity, and she let you believe it was still his so you wouldn't come after her for the money while he was still alive." Judge Vance looked at the deed again. "Case dismissed with prejudice," she said, banging her gavel. "And Mr. Sterling, I suggest you check the title registry next time before you waste my court's time." She looked at me. Miss Williams, you have the patience of a saint. I stood up. I looked at my father. He was slumped in his chair, his mouth open, looking like a fish on a dock. Brianna was crying real tears this time, panic tears. Kyle was staring at the wall doing the math on his crypto debt that was now due with no equity to pay it. I have one more thing, Your Honor, Mr. Henderson said. We are countersuing for the tuition. He dropped the second file on the table. The promissory notes. The show wasn't over. It was just getting started. And I was finally enjoying the performance. The silence in the courtroom following the revelation of the deed of sale was absolute. It was not the quiet of a library or a church. It was the vacuum of space, a void where oxygen used to be. My father, Otis, looked as though someone had reached into his chest and pulled out his lungs. His mouth opened and closed, a fish gasping on a dock, but no sound came out. The shiny suit that looked so imposing an hour ago now seemed to hang off him like a costume on a wire hanger. Mr. Sterling, the shark in the pinstripe suit, was the first to move. He snatched the document from the judge's bench, his movements jerky and frantic. He scanned the pages, his eyes darting back and forth, desperate to find a flaw. He was looking for a missing signature, a wrong date, a typo, anything to stop the bleeding. But there was nothing. Mr. Henderson did not make mistakes. It is a forgery, Sterling stammered, his voice lacking any conviction. It has to be. Earl Williams would never sell his home to one grandchild. This is a fabrication. Judge Vance leaned over her bench, her expression one of utter disdain. Mr. Sterling, I suggest you look at the stamp on the back page. That is the official seal of the Fulton County Clerk of Superior Court. That document was recorded, filed, and digitized 5 years ago. Unless your client has a time machine, this is a valid transfer of title. The property in question did not belong to the estate of Earl Williams because Earl Williams did not own it when he died. It belongs to Latasha Williams. Fee simple. Case closed. Bernice let out a sound that was half sob, half shriek. She slumped against my father, clutching her Bible as if it could rewrite property law. But it wasn't religious fervor. It was financial terror. She was doing the math in her head. No house meant no equity. No equity meant no renovation for the condo. No renovation meant they were stuck in their mess. But I wasn't looking at my parents. I was looking at Brianna. She hadn't moved. She was staring at the table, her face a mask of frozen shock. Her entire worldview, the unshakable belief that she was the princess who deserved the castle, had just been shattered by a single piece of paper. She looked up at me, and her eyes were filled with a childlike confusion that quickly hardened into hatred. "You tricked us," she whispered loud enough for the microphone to catch. "You let us believe it was his. You let us think we were inheriting it. You lied." "I didn't lie," I said, my voice calm and carrying to the back of the room. "I protected him. I bought the house for market value, Brianna. $250,000. Cash. I emptied my savings. I took extra shifts. I lived on ramen noodles and slept 4 hours a night so that I could put that money in Grandpa's hand." "Why?" Otis croaked. "Why would you do that?" "Because I knew you," I said, turning to face him. "I knew that if the house was in his name, you would find a way to take it. You would have bullied him into a reverse mortgage. You would have forged his signature on a loan. You would have done exactly what you tried to do to me. I bought it so he could live in peace. The money I paid him, that was the money that paid for his home care nurses. That was the money that bought his medication. That was the money that put food in his fridge while you were leasing cars and going on cruises. I bought the house so I could use the money to keep him alive." The courtroom was deadly silent. Even the court reporter had stopped typing for a second, staring at me. "So you see, Your Honor," Mr. Henderson said, his voice smooth as silk, "the plaintiffs are suing for a distribution of an asset that does not exist in the estate. This lawsuit is frivolous, it is baseless, and frankly, it is an abuse of this court's time." Judge Vance nodded slowly. I agree. The motion to dismiss the claim regarding the real property is granted with prejudice. The house belongs to the defendant. Kyle, who had been staring at the wall as if trying to calculate an escape route, suddenly stood up. Wait, he said, his voice cracking. Wait a minute. What about the legal fees? We spent 10 grand on this lawyer. Who pays for that? Judge Vance looked at him over her spectacles. You do, young man. That is how losing works. Kyle sank back into his chair, putting his head in his hands. I could see the panic radiating off him. He was $400,000 in debt. He had just lost the asset he planned to steal, and now he owed Sterling 10 grand he didn't have. But I wasn't done. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. It was a sound I knew well. It was the sound of the second barrel being loaded. Your Honor, he said. While the defense is grateful for the dismissal, we have a counterclaim that we would like to address. We filed it yesterday morning along with the deed. Judge Vance shuffled her papers. Ah, yes, the countersuit for repayment of loans. Loans, Bernice shouted, finding her voice. What loans? We never borrowed money from her. She gave us gifts. She is the daughter. It is her duty. Mr. Henderson picked up the second file. It was thicker than the first. He walked over to the plaintiff's table and dropped it with a heavy thud in front of Brianna. This is not about parental duty, Mrs. Williams, Mr. Henderson said. This is about a contract between adults, specifically between Latasha Williams and Brianna Williams. Brianna looked at the file as if it were a bomb. What is this? Open it, I said. She opened the file. Inside were stacks of bank transfer records, hundreds of them, every tuition payment, every housing transfer, every textbook fee, every emergency funds transfer for spring break or sorority dues. 5 years of payments, Mr. Henderson narrated, totaling $212,400.50. Brianna laughed a nervous, high-pitched sound. This is a joke. You paid for my school. You said you were taking care of it. You can't sue me for gifts. That's not how the law works. You can't just decide 5 years later that it was a loan because you're mad. I stood up. I walked to the edge of the bar, the low wall separating the gallery from the court. I didn't decide it later, Brianna. I decided it on day one. Mr. Henderson pulled a single sheet of paper from the back of the file and handed it to the judge. Then, he handed a copy to Sterling. Your Honor, Mr. Henderson said. My client is a very meticulous woman. She works in a field where a decimal point in the wrong place kills people. She pays attention to details. When she agreed to fund her sister's education, she did not do so as a charity. She did so through a private lending arrangement. Sterling looked at the paper, his eyes widening. This is a digital signature log. Correct, Mr. Henderson said. Brianna, do you remember how I sent you the money? I used the Zelle app and the direct bank-to-bank transfer portal on our family credit union website. Yeah, so, Brianna sneered. You transferred money. Big deal. And do you remember that every semester before the big transfer for tuition would clear, you had to log into the portal to accept the funds? I would send you a link, and you had to click Accept. Yeah, Brianna said, rolling her eyes. It was annoying. I had to click through a bunch of screens. Exactly, I said. You clicked through them. You didn't read them. You just wanted the money. Mr. Henderson pointed to the document in the judge's hand. Your Honor, what the plaintiff failed to read was the terms and conditions of the transfer. My client set up each transfer not as a gift, but as a promissory note, a private student loan. The terms were clearly stated in the text box she scrolled past every single time. By accepting these funds, the recipient agrees that this is a loan subject to repayment commencing 6 months after graduation. Interest is set at 5% per annum compounding. I looked at Brianna. Her face had gone the color of old ash. You checked the box, Brianna, I said softly. Every single time. There was a little box that said, I agree to the terms of this transfer. And you clicked it. You clicked it 20 times over 5 years. No, she whispered. No, that's not legal. You can't hide a loan in an app. It wasn't hidden, Judge Vance said, reading the document intently. It says right here in bold letters at the top of the acceptance screen, Private Educational Loan Agreement. It appears you scrolled past it in exactly 3 seconds, according to the timestamp. The judge looked up, and for the first time all morning, a smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. It seems, Miss Williams, that in your haste to get the money you signed a legally binding contract 20 times. Sterling looked at the document. He looked at Brianna. He closed his folder. He knew it was over. He knew that digital signatures were as binding as ink in the state of Georgia. He knew that claiming, "I didn't read it," was not a defense in a court of law, especially for a college graduate. "But I never signed a paper," Brianna screamed, standing up, knocking her chair over. "This is a trick. She tricked me. It is not a trick." Judge Vance said, her voice stern. "It is a contract. You are an adult. You accepted over $200,000. Did you really think that money just fell from the sky? Did you think your sister was just an infinite resource for you to drain?" "Yes," Brianna shouted, tears streaming down her face, the mask of the victim slipping completely to reveal the spoiled child beneath. "Yes, that is her job. She is the older sister. She is supposed to take care of me. It isn't fair. I have debt. Kyle has debt. We can't pay this. We need the house." Kyle put his head on the table. He wasn't comforting her. He was hiding. He realized that not only was he not getting the house, but his wife came with a negative net worth of $250,000. He had married a golden goose and found out she was just a debt anchor. Judge Vance looked at the spectacle. She looked at Otis and Bernice, who were staring at me with a mixture of horror and awe, as if they had never seen me before. And they hadn't. They had never seen Tasha the architect. They had only seen Tasha the doormat. The judge looked back at the promissory note logs. She looked at the timestamp where Brianna had accepted a $15,000 transfer in 4 seconds flat. And then Judge Vance started to laugh. It wasn't a mocking laugh. It was a laugh of genuine disbelief, the kind of laugh you let out when you see a coyote walk into a trap it set for a roadrunner. She covered her mouth with her hand, her shoulders shaking. She tried to compose herself, clearing her throat, but the smile remained. "Order," she said, though the only disorder was the weeping coming from the plaintiff's table. "Order." She looked at me. "Miss Williams," she said, her eyes twinkling, "I have sat on this bench for 20 years. I have seen families fight over china sets and dogs. I have seen greed that would make Midas blush. But I have never ever seen a defendant come to court with receipts like this." She turned to Brianna. "The court finds in favor of the defendant on the countersuit. The plaintiff, Brianna Williams Davis, is ordered to repay the principal sum of $212,000 plus accrued interest to Latasha Williams. A repayment schedule will be established by the court clerk. Failure to pay will result in wage garnishment and liens against any future assets. Any future assets. That meant if Brianna ever got a job, I got a cut. If she ever bought a car, I had a claim. I owned her financial future until she paid me back what she stole." "Court is adjourned," Judge Vance said, slamming the gavel. The sound rang out like a gunshot. Brianna collapsed into her chair, sobbing uncontrollably. Bernice was patting her back but looking at me with terrified eyes. Otis was staring at his shoes. I stood up. I smoothed my suit. I picked up my purse. Kyle stood up too. He looked at Brianna, a sobbing mess of debt and entitlement. He looked at me, calm and victorious. Then he looked at Otis. "You said she was weak," Kyle said to my father, his voice loud in the quiet room. "You said she would fold." Otis didn't answer. Kyle looked at Brianna. "I'm going to the hotel," he said, cold and flat. "Don't come with me. I need to call my lawyer." He walked out. He didn't look back. The marriage was over before the reception photos were even developed. I walked past their table. I didn't stop. I didn't gloat. I didn't say, "I told you so." I just walked. Tasha Bernice called out, her voice cracking. "Tasha, wait. We can fix this. We can work out a payment plan. We are family." I kept walking. I pushed open the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom and stepped out into the hallway. The air was still heavy, but I felt light. I felt weightless. Mr. Henderson walked beside me, a small smile on his face. "That went well," he said. "I think Grandpa Earl would have liked it," I replied. "He would have loved it." Mr. Henderson agreed. "He always said you were the smart one. He just worried you were too nice. I think we can put that worry to rest." We walked out of the courthouse and into the sun. I took a deep breath of the city air. It smelled of exhaust and rain and freedom. I pulled out my phone. I had one more call to make. Not to my family, not to the hospital. I called a travel agent. "Hello," I said when she answered. "I would like to book a trip. Europe. First class. One way. I have some vacation time saved up, and I just came into some money." Behind me, the courthouse doors opened, and I heard my family arguing, their voices fading into the background noise of the city, irrelevant and small. I walked toward my car, toward my house, toward my life. I was Tasha Williams. I was the girl who paid the bills, and today I collected the debt. The sound of the gavel striking the wood block was not loud, but it resonated through the courtroom like a thunderclap, signaling the end of the storm. Judge Vance didn't waste time with pleasantries. She looked over her spectacles at the huddled mess of the plaintiff's table, her expression one of professional finality. "Judgment is entered in favor of the defendant, Latasha Williams." On all counts, she declared, her voice devoid of sympathy. "The plaintiff's claim to the property at 452 Malcolm X Boulevard is dismissed with prejudice. The deed is valid. The home belongs to the defendant." She turned a page in her file, the rustle of paper sounding impossibly loud in the dead silence. "Regarding the countersuit, the court finds the evidence of the digital promissory notes to be binding and enforceable. The plaintiff, Brianna Williams Davis, is hereby ordered to repay the principal amount of $212,400.50. Statutory interest will apply from the date of this judgment. The court orders a wage garnishment schedule to be set up immediately. If the plaintiff fails to secure employment within 90 days, a lien will be placed on any future assets or inheritances." Brianna made a sound that was half gasp, half sob. It was the sound of a drowning woman realizing the life raft had just been punctured. She looked at Kyle, grabbing his sleeve with desperate fingers. "Kyle," she whimpered. "Kyle, do something. You said this wouldn't happen. You said we would win." Kyle didn't look at her. He was staring straight ahead at the judge, his jaw working. He was doing the math. I could see the numbers scrolling behind his eyes. He was $400,000 in the hole to loan sharks. He had been counting on the equity in my house to save his legs from being broken. Now, not only was that equity gone, but his wife was carrying a debt load that made her radioactive. "Case closed," Judge Vance said. She stood up, gathered her robes, and vanished into her chambers. The bailiff moved toward the door, unlocking it. The show was over. I stood up. I felt a strange sensation in my legs, a lightness, as if gravity had suddenly decided to loosen its grip on me. I looked at Mr. Henderson. He was smiling, a small, satisfied quirk of his lips as he packed his papers into his battered briefcase. "We did it," he said softly. "Earl can rest now." I nodded. I couldn't speak yet. The relief was too big, too expansive. It filled my throat. We turned to leave. We had to pass their table to get to the exit. I didn't speed up. I didn't slow down. I walked with the steady, rhythmic pace of a woman who has somewhere to be. As I passed them, the explosion happened. It wasn't directed at me. It was directed inward. The family unit, held together by greed and shared entitlement, finally detonated. Kyle stood up so abruptly his chair tipped over backward, clattering loudly on the floor. He shook Brianna's hand off his arm as if she were a spider. "Don't touch me," he hissed. Brianna looked up at him, her mascara running in black streaks down her cheeks. "Kyle, baby, we have to figure this out. We can appeal. We can..." "Appeal with what money?" Kyle shouted, his voice cracking. He didn't care who was watching anymore. The facade of the cool, successful entrepreneur was gone. All that was left was a desperate, broke con artist. "You told me the house was a sure thing. You told me your sister was a pushover. You lied to me, Brianna." "I didn't lie," Brianna screamed back, standing up to face him. "I thought she would fold. You said you knew how to handle her. You said you were the man. I am a man who is looking at a wife with $250,000 in debt and zero assets. Kyle yelled right in her face. I can't afford you. I can't afford your student loans. I can't afford your parents. He looked at Otis and Bernice, who were sitting frozen, looking like deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. And you too, Kyle spat. You promised me the truck. You promised me the renovation money if I helped you get the house. You're broke. You're worse than broke. You're leeches. How dare you? Bernice gasped, clutching her chest. After we welcomed you into our family, your family is a sinking ship. Kyle laughed a harsh barking sound. And I am not going down with it. He turned to Brianna. She was reaching for him again, her face twisted in panic. I want a divorce, Kyle said. Cold, flat, final. Brianna froze. What? You heard me. I'm filing today. Annulment, divorce, whatever is fastest. You have nothing, Brianna. You brought nothing to the table but debt and drama. I'm done. He turned on his heel and stormed toward the door. He pushed past me without even looking at me. I wasn't a person to him anymore. I was just a failed opportunity. Brianna collapsed back into her chair, wailing. It was a primal sound, the sound of a child who has broken her favorite toy. Kyle. Come back. Please. But he was gone. The heavy wooden doors swung shut behind him, cutting off her pleas. I watched her for a second. The golden child. The princess. Sitting in a heap of ruin, abandoned by her prince, shackled to a debt she could never repay. I waited for a flicker of pity to rise in my chest. I waited for the old instinct, the big sister instinct, to kick in. I waited for the urge to go over there, pat her back, and tell her I would fix it. It didn't come. The well was dry. Mr. Henderson touched my elbow. Come on, Tasha, let's go. We walked out into the hallway. The air was cooler out here, away from the heat of their self-destruction. We walked down the long marble corridor toward the elevators. Shaish, wait. It was my mother. Bernice came running down the hall, her heels clicking frantically on the stone floor. Otis was shuffling behind her, looking older and grayer than I had ever seen him. The bluster was gone. The arrogance was gone. All that was left was fear. I stopped. I didn't turn around completely. I just angled my body, waiting. Tasha, baby, please? Bernice panted, catching up to us. She reached out to grab my hand, but I shifted my purse, putting a leather barrier between us. She stopped, her hand hovering in the air. We can't leave it like this, she said, tears streaming down her face. Look at what's happening. Kyle left her. Brianna is hysterical. She's ruined Tasha. That judgment, it will destroy her credit. She'll never be able to buy a car. She'll never be able to rent a decent apartment. I know, I said calmly. That is what happens when you sign a promissory note and default on it. It is called consequences. But she's your sister. Otis pleaded, coming up beside my mother. His voice was wheedling, pathetic. You can't let her go under like this. You have the money. You have the house. You won. Okay, you won. You proved your point. Now be the bigger person. Forgive the debt. Let her come home to the brownstone until she gets on her feet. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had screamed at a receptionist that I was a monster. I looked at the man who had gambled away my grandfather's security. Be the bigger person, I asked. I have been the bigger person for 5 years, Dad. I was the bigger person when I paid her tuition. I was the bigger person when I paid your bookie. I was the bigger person when I saved the house you tried to lose. And what did it get me? It got me sued. It got me blackmailed. It got me attacked at my job. We were desperate, Bernice cried. We made mistakes. But we are family. Doesn't that mean anything to you? It means something, I said. It means you know exactly where to hit me, to make it hurt. But here's the thing about being the bigger person, Mom. Eventually, you get tired of shrinking so everyone else can feel tall. I turned to Mr. Henderson. "Give me the keys." He reached into his pocket and handed me the key fob. It wasn't the key to his sedan. It was a heavy silver key fob with a three-pointed star logo. My parents stared at it. "What is that?" Otis asked, his eyes widening. "That I said pressing the unlock button is my car." Through the glass doors of the courthouse entrance, down on the curb where the sunlight was gleaming, a car chirped. It was a brand new Mercedes-Benz S-Class. Black, sleek, powerful. It was the kind of car Otis had dreamed of leasing but could never afford. It was the kind of car that screamed success. "I bought it yesterday," I said, watching my father's face crumble. "I paid cash." "But," Otis stammered. "The truck," Kyle said. "Kyle lied," I said. "Kyle is broke. I am not. I make $200,000 a year, remember? You told the whole hospital. And since I don't have to pay for Brianna's tuition anymore, and I don't have to pay your debts anymore, I decided to treat myself," Tasha Bernice whispered, looking at the car with naked envy. "You can't just leave us here. We drove with Kyle. He took the car. We don't have a ride." "There is a bus stop on the corner," I said. "Or you can call an Uber. I hear they are very reliable." "Tasha," she screamed, grabbing at my sleeve. "You are our daughter. You owe us." I pulled my arm away. I stepped back, smoothing my suit jacket. "I don't owe you a thing," I said. "I paid my debt. I paid it in full. The receipt is in the court record." I turned and walked through the glass doors. The heat of the Atlanta afternoon hit me, but it felt good. It felt like a baptism. I walked to the Mercedes. I opened the door and smelled that new car smell, leather and promise. I slid into the driver's seat. It molded to my back perfectly. Mr. Henderson got into the passenger seat. He buckled his seatbelt and looked at me. "Nice ride," he said. "It handles beautifully," I replied. I started the engine. It purred. I looked out the window. My parents were standing on the sidewalk. Bernice was sobbing into her hands. Otis was staring at the car, his face a mask of regret and longing. Brianna had stumbled out of the courthouse and was standing behind them, looking small and broken. They looked like strangers. They looked like people I used to know a long time ago. I put the car in drive. I didn't wave. I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. I pulled out into traffic and merged onto the highway, leaving them behind on the concrete island of their own making. The drive home was the longest and shortest drive of my life. When I pulled up to the brownstone, it looked different. The threat was gone. The "for rent" sign they had prematurely stuck in the yard was gone. I had removed it myself this morning. The house stood tall and proud, the bricks glowing in the afternoon sun. It wasn't a battlefield anymore. It was a home. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The silence greeted me, but this time it wasn't heavy. It wasn't waiting for a drill or a scream. It was peaceful. It was the silence of a library, the silence of a church after the service is over. I kicked off my heels. I walked to the kitchen and opened the wine fridge. I pulled out a bottle of Chateauneuf du Pape that I had been saving for a special occasion. I poured a glass, the deep red liquid swirling in the crystal. I walked into the living room and sat in Grandpa Earl's favorite armchair. The leather groaned familiarly. I took a sip of the wine. It tasted like blackberries and earth and victory. I pulled my phone out of my purse. I opened the contacts list. I scrolled down to Mom, Dad, Brianna, Kyle. I selected them all. Delete, 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 delete. Then I went to the blocked list. Empty. My phone was clean. My life was clean. I opened the browser and went to the airline website. I had been looking at the flights for weeks, daring myself to dream. Now I didn't have to dream. I selected the destination, Paris, then a train to Rome, then maybe a week on the Amalfi Coast. I selected the seat, first class, lie flat pod, champagne service. I entered my credit card information, the card that was solely in my name, the card that no longer had tuition payments pending. Confirm booking. The screen flashed, "Your trip is confirmed. Bon voyage, Latasha." I put the phone down on the side table next to the picture of Grandpa Earl. In the photo, he was smiling that wide, gap-toothed smile he had when he was telling a joke. "We did it, old man," I whispered, raising my glass to the photo. "We saved the house. And we saved the girl." I took another sip of wine and closed my eyes, listening to the house breathe around me. For the first time in 5 years, for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't waiting for the phone to ring with a demand. I wasn't waiting to be told I wasn't enough. I was alone, and I was completely, utterly free. Tasha's story teaches us that blind loyalty is a dangerous currency. For years, she paid for affection that never existed, learning the hard way that generosity without boundaries breeds entitlement, not gratitude. True family is built on mutual respect, not DNA or financial transactions. Her journey proves that saying no to toxic relatives isn't an act of betrayal, it is an act of survival. We must learn to value ourselves enough to walk away from tables where respect is no longer being served, because you cannot save people who are willing to drown you to stay afloat. If you believe that your peace is worth fighting for, hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of survivors.